Hello students, welcome to SV Technology Attribute. So simply the property of an entity is known as attribute. Every entity is a real world object. It should have some properties like name, rule number and age, date of birth, salary like this. Here if we take student as an entity, the properties of student entity will have these attributes, that is rule number, name, batch and age. Here we have so many types of attributes in our Dbms. We can see in next slide, that is composite attribute. Composite attribute means simple attribute which can be divided into subparts further is known as composite attribute. For example, if we take name as an attribute, we can divide that name into first name, middle name and last name like this. The attribute which can be divided into subparts is known as composite attribute. We can take another example, address. We can divide into city, state, pin code and house number. Like this we can divide an attribute into subparts, then it is called as composite attribute. Next one, simple or atomic attribute. So this is the quite opposite to the composite attribute, which cannot be divided further. Means suppose pin code is an example for simple attribute which cannot be divided again. Suppose student is an entity which has rule number, class and age. So these rule number, class and age are we are unable to divide again, like first name, last name, middle name. Single valued attribute. So the attribute which have a single value for a particular item is known as single valued attribute. Suppose if we take a student entity, the gender should be only single valued. It should be either male or female like this. If a student has rule number, should be single value. Any student should not have two rule numbers like this. Single valued attribute. Multi-valued attribute. It is exact opposite of single valued attribute. Single valued attribute can have only single value at particular item. Here multi-valued attribute can have more than one value for each attribute. Here example, multi-valued attribute. Attribute having a set of values for single entity is called multi-valued attribute. It is exact opposite of single valued attribute. Single valued attribute have only single value for particular item. Here we can have more than a value. Means suppose if we take a student as an entity, student can have more than one email ID, one mobile number and more than one hobby like this. This multi-valued attribute will be represented by double ellipse. Derived attribute or stored attributes. When one attribute value is derived from the other is called a derived attribute. For example, age can be derived from date of birth, where age is the derived attribute, date of birth is the stored attribute. Derived attribute is represented by dashed ellipse. Student is an entity, date of birth and age. Date of birth is an attribute, age is derived attribute which is derived from date of birth. It is represented by dashed ellipse. Key attributes. It is also called as primary key. Key attributes are special type of attributes that act as the primary key for an entity, and they can uniquely identify an entity from an entity set. The value that key attribute stores must be unique and non-repetitive. Here we take student is an entity. The student rule number will be unique. It should not be repeated. It is represented by ellipse with the text underline. Each table must have a key attribute.